Good evening. This is the January 16th, 2024 meeting of the Capital Investment Plan Subcommittee report committee of the Comprehensive Financial Advisory Committee in the town of Barnstable. I'm Hector Gunther. Neil Kleinfeld, the chair of the subcommittee, will lead the meeting. I'm going to call the roll and then turn it over to Neil. So Neil, are you there?
I am here, present.
Jim Sproul, are you
Present.
there? Great. And Hector is here. So got all three of us. We got a quorum. Take it away, Neil.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that, Hector, and thank you for setting this up, Mark. Actually, if we can screen share, I guess, or if Mark, you've got the deck and you want to, whichever. I am now co-host, so I should be able to share my screen. And let's see, does this work? Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay. So the agenda is as shown here, is to talk about Word on the web, about a few changes to the cover page, justify areas of needs, charts if we can use those, talk about who's going to lead which section, and then address some of the calendar issues that came up in the last discussion with Lillian.
Okay.
Anything else that we need to cover?
I think we may encounter some other topics as we go along, but I think that's a great start.
Okay. Jim, okay with you?
Agreed. Yeah. Awesome.
Okay. So relative to Word on the web, wondering if everyone has had a good experience and this is going to work, or do we have issues to address?
Well, I can speak for myself. I haven't tried to do anything more in terms of editing. I just added a comment and successfully was able to do that. I've got the draft Word document open on my computer screen. So I think it's going to work. There may be a couple of wrinkles as we go through the process, in which case, Neil, we'll call you for emergency help. But I think it's going to work. I think it's a great idea.
I do as well. I've been using it. It's easy to use, so it's a good way to move forward.
Okay, good. I agree with you, Hector. If we will probably run into issues that we didn't expect, but I think we can overcome them.
Okay.
Okay, so
just if I can interject, who just joined, please?
we have our counselor here, our liaison, Craig.
Oh, we have Craig. Good evening, Craig. How are you?
He seems to be on mute.
Okay. He's getting settled in.
There we go. We're not on mute anymore. Hello, Hector.
Hi. So we just started, Craig. We're going over the slide deck that Neil put together a week or two ago on how we should do the meeting. You can see it up on page 1 up on the screen there. Okay.
Great. Very good.
Okay, so we've gotten through the first piece, which is everyone's been able to use Word on the web in an integrated way. So that'll, I think, help us a lot as we go through. One of the things that I noticed in going through the last year's report, which was very good, was it's 10 pages long, but it didn't have any kind of table of contents. And you actually had to get to the end before you got to the recommendations and the concluding remarks. So I was thinking that for this year, we might want to look at what are we going to do on the cover page. And I mocked up a couple just so that we could get a table of contents up where the reader immediately knows what they're going to see, and took a simple one on the left and a more visually appealing, I thought, on the right. So guess I'm looking for reactions in terms of what people think.
Well, I mean, personally, I'm a visual learner, so the way the information was parsed on that second page, or that the right hand side of the screen, with the seal of the town, etc. I think that's awesome. So I'm a big proponent of that type of reading materials.
Yeah, I think it's, you know, I'm open to innovations and how we make this more appealing and more readable. My only comment on the right side page is we might want to have somewhere in the header table of contents, the words table of contents, so it's clear to the reader that's what it is. And up top you have capital improvement plan, and then you say CFAX review and advice. Maybe you could insert below that table of contents.
Can clearly do that.
Yeah, but I think it's good. The other comment I would make is the font in each of those colored ovals. They're sort of elongated ovals, is a little small. So if we're able to shrink the size of the
What size is the font?
I have no idea, but I get the idea that making it larger would make it more readable, I think.
Yeah,
the screen.
if you could shrink the seal to the left a little bit, that would give you more room to enlarge the font a little bit on the right.
Okay.
So one other just nit is Jackie Johnson. She spells her first name Jacky.
You're correct.
So we need to.
That's very funny. I picked that up from one of the, you know, that's a very good point.
Yeah.
It was misspelled last year too.
Is that right? Wow.
Yeah. I just copied and pasted.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, her given name is Jacqueline.
Yeah.
Maybe we should ask her how she wants her name to appear.
Can do. We have time.
Yeah, but it is Jacky if she prefers the nickname.
Okay.
It might also, just from a color perspective, you might want to just stick with one color, you know, light blue or something along that line, as opposed to different colors. It could be a little confusing, but it's just that's a nit.
Yeah, yeah, that might help me with my, you know, perception issue, which is what are we seeing here? And if
Because you're not
it's all
trying to
one
draw,
color,
you're not trying to draw your eye to any particular topic.
right?
You're just outlining.
Yeah.
Color
Okay.
combinations will do that.
Okay.
All good input. Okay.
I guess my last question is, so last year's cover had the CIP subcommittee on the cover page. You have here, you don't have the CIP subcommittee. So if there's a way to fit it in, just think about that. That's
Yeah,
all.
I was thinking about that. It was very repetitive and just takes up space, which
Yeah.
didn't make a lot of sense. What
Yeah.
I could do is put an asterisk on the people who are a part of it and just make a note of it in the bottom on the
Okay.
there.
Okay. Not a big deal. Okay.
Okay, good.
And I'm going to
Moving
bring up
on.
one more thing. It's just a nit
Yeah.
of mine. I'd love to be able to, you know, CFAC was formed, I think, around 1991.
Yeah, you found that. I remember. Yeah.
I'd love to have an established date. I don't know if that is legal or not, but I'm a big fan of that. It just kind of shows longevity.
I think that's great.
So anyways, it doesn't have to be decided here, but you know, it'd be kind of fun to have on there underneath or besides to the left of CFAC, EST, and then on the right, maybe 1991 or something like that. But just being cute, that's all.
Were you there at the creation, Jim?
Touche.
Oh,
no,
yes, but
I have a
Mark,
long memory, you know.
Seriously, were you? That's a serious question. Were you there then?
No, I was not.
Okay.
Early, I think it was early 2000s.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, Neil, I can get you the date from our administrative code as to when the committee was established by the code was updated.
okay, that's great. Now we'll just have to figure out how to put it in there somewhere. Thank you. Okay, on to more financial business. One of the things I proposed earlier was we look at the spending that the capital is being submitted for, and then when it's recommended by the use, or what I'll call area of need, rather than just by department. And this is how we compare for this year's submission. And I think that I would advocate that the left-hand side that goes by use is going to be more informative to the reader in terms of something that, like buildings and repairs especially, cuts across so many departments, and it becomes a big issue. Not compared to water, obviously, but this is why I was recommending we might look at it this way and understand what it is that are the priorities. Does that make sense, or what are people's reactions?
My first
Well-
reaction in viewing this was that it's an interesting category to, to take a look at. I mean, it's fairly consistent, you have wastewater, sewers, and CWMP are, they're both at the same, I mean, there's a lot changed between what's on the right displayed as DPW at 9%, and let's see, where's the other one? I guess there's not an equivalent on the area of needs chart, but
That's exactly correct. I mean, the real issue, I think, is what the right-hand side misleads about is what people believe DPW does is actually shown on the left a little bit in terms of road, sidewalk, and asphalt. That's the least of what they actually do, even when you take out the issue that they're running CWMP.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, and to me, one of the issues you brought up, Jim, was we've got a lot of building submissions that year after year do not get recommended.
Right, or approved.
So when you pull those out of golf and marine and, and school and what DPW is doing, it becomes close to, 13% of what we're spending, which I think is an important finding.
Okay.
So Neil, I'm thinking a couple of things. First of all, the parenthetical in the header, pre-recommended projects. Those are, in other words, these pie charts link to that spreadsheet that you sent around on New Year's Day.
Yes.
First of all, pre-recommended is what came out of the 2 rounds of the departmental meetings, right? So these are the ones that that have been bubbled up to Mark L's to choose from. Is that correct?
I don't know. Mark would have to talk to that. This is actually the submission of all the different departments as of December 12th, which is still being changed a little bit. It is not what has been impacted by the CIP task force prioritization, and it certainly is not showing what is being recommended by the
by L's.
By L's. Pre-recommended was a made-up term on my. I could have just said submission, and that might be clear.
So this is, we can look at this as sort of departmental's initial wish list.
It's what I think keeps getting called a submission.
Submission.
Yeah, and I think that's important because words matter. So I think we should need to be on the same page with that respect. And we're showing $280 million of submissions from all departments.
Right, and the idea would be, and the spreadsheet set up to, when we get in March, the recommended, we'll be able to do the same pie chart for whatever is still now recommended and compare the two. So it'll demonstrate what things did not get everything that was submitted?
Okay, I think that, I was gonna suggest that we have, that I like your area of need analysis. B, I would love to see on the right side of this page in our report, what eventually gets recommended by Els and what those percentages are.
So if this is the case, so can I just ask a question? If our intended audience of this report is the town council, Neil, what would you expect them to take out of this area of need versus by department, which is typically how they receive it? What would be important to them that you're trying to express?
Well, I think that the thing that strikes me is there's no way to understand, for instance, what percentage of the capital is going into anything but water.
Oh, so when we say our strategic plan, and forgive me, I don't know what it all, but I mean, I remember hearing water quality, that's a primary strategic objective to the community. So if we're then investing 60% of our funds available, or I'm sorry, if we are submitting 60% of our projects towards water quality, sewers, wouldn't that be in keeping with the town's strategic objectives?
I don't know how to align
Okay,
the capital to the strategic objectives. I actually tried, and that, I think if somebody wants to take a look at that, maybe they can figure out how to do it. I couldn't.
Mark, is that a doable task? In other words, to take a look at these area of needs and see how they, because I think an area of need would better line up with strategic direction than a departmental submission. Is that task doable based on your knowledge of the strategic plan?
So if I may, we have that evaluation criteria matrix. I think you've probably
Yep.
seen it in our capital plan. It has 10 strategic areas. Those are the strategic areas that every project submission that is brought forward, at least for this ensuing fiscal year, are evaluated against. And so I would suggest you take a look at that tool.
Okay,
It addresses things like usage, education, public health and safety, environment, housing. There's various categories in that matrix that we evaluate those projects that are being proposed for FY25 this year anyways, against.
Okay.
And that's a process that we're undergoing right now. The CIP task force takes that, does that evaluation, and that scoring against those 10 criteria are part of the submission that goes to the town manager for his review when he's deciding which projects to recommend for funding for the next fiscal year. I got a question on this page, Neil. The total 280 million. I'm not sure what that represents. Does that represent just general fund submissions?
No, that represents enterprise, general fund, and CWMP.
For 5 years, 1 year?
1 year for just 2025.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
And Mark, this document you just referred to, the strategic planning document, where would we find that, or can you circulate it?
Yeah, I can circulate it, but it's the CIP book itself. Every year we have a section within that, a chapter within the CIP document that talks about the evaluation process that's used, and the matrix is in that section of the document.
Okay, and forgive me, where would I find the CIP book?
On a website under finance.
So it's fiscal year 2025 CIP book. That's what it's labeled as.
Go to the website. And I can send you the link. I can send you I'll send you the evaluation criteria matrix. That would be the easiest thing. to do.
Okay, but I wanted to make a note of where the CIP book is, and
Okay.
it's on the
I'll send
finance
you a link.
website.
It's
Okay,
on,
great, great.
it's on Mark's page. It's
Yep.
it's last, it's the one that's there is for last year, but it'll be the same
Yep.
criteria.
Yeah,
The problem
okay.
is they're just, if I understand it correctly, they're just now going through trying to score against that. And I think if we can get that information, and we should look at it in March.
Okay,
Okay, so we can continue this analysis in the future. But I want,
this is a great idea to focus on, you know, where the money is going, as opposed to which department is spending it. And maybe let me mull it, but area of need that might not quite capture it.
yeah, I changed it to use.
Yeah, area of investment or something like that. But let's think about that. But it's a great
Good.
idea. And then
Okay.
if we can have a pie chart on the right after Al's comes out with his recommendations, it'd be interesting to see the comparison.
Okay, good.
All right.
As I sent out, I think we don't have to answer them all here, but I think we need to, as a team, create a set of questions for the different areas so that we know what data we're looking for as we go through, some of which I think we'll get in the plans, some of which we will get during the sessions with CFAC where the departments present. Gareth got us the answer last time to when the final submissions will be available towards the end of January. The other questions that I have are, I think we're going to want to look at the amount recommended in the first year of the plan over time, because I think this year, I don't know how much of that 280 million is going to get recommended, but even if half, that's going to be obviously a large change from the past. And I think we should be able to point that out. My question is probably most specifically trying to assemble this data. Fiscal year 2022 was actually recommended at 83 million.
Recommended by Mark Ells.
Yes.
Okay.
But when I go to the next year, it's back down to about 53. It looks like 30 million for sewer was recommended, but then didn't happen. And so a question from finance, from Mark and his team, is what's the right number, and would they agree with this from a history point of view, so that we're showing what fiscal year 2025 is going to look like compared to the right numbers. And then another question I had that I ran across is, what's the borrowing capacity? I believe it was October, Mark presented to the town council that there was existing capacity of about 175 million over the next 5 years for CWMP. That's going to get absorbed just next year if it all gets approved, because it's 170 million. So I'm just trying to make sure I understand what that said, and at some point we ought to discuss, how does the 432 that's now being requested compare to the 175? And is that an apples and apples comparison?
So if I could just interject. So Mark, on Neil's initial question about fiscal year 2022, it seems to me we ought to put the 3 million in and not the 53. Do you agree?
Yeah, we'll go back and we'll verify these numbers, Neil.
Yes.
I think, you could be correct. It could have been initially a project that was brought forward, but then it was withdrawn. So, but we'll verify the numbers as to what actually got approved. You want to recommend it or approved? Because those can be two different things.
I'd like that number to be approved.
Approved meaning.
meaning
Mark- This is
authorized,
what Mark Ells approved.
what the town council approved. In other words, Mark Ells goes in with his
Right?
submission, right, and then it's voted on by the town council, or is that the right word? Authorized, or what's the appropriate terminology to
I-
use?
Yeah, I can certainly approved, I think, is a much more reasonable set of numbers to start with, but we'll want to highlight that the 2025 then is recommended, since when we send our report to the town council, it will not have yet been approved. So we got a little
Right.
bit of an apples and apples. We'll just have to
Okay.
clarify that, but
A second question for Mark. Is there often or ever a divergence between what Mark Ells recommends and what town council approves?
Sometimes they're different, not significantly though,
Right,
and it doesn't happen often.
right,
Most of the time what happens is a project will initially become part of the town manager's original proposal, but then it may subsequently get withdrawn for some reason.
okay.
And
Well,
I think
well,
that
I
could be
agree
what
with-
happened in 2022.
So I agree with Jim. If we can show approvals and make it clear, we should have footnotes when we first use these words, recommended and approved. So people know what we're talking about. That's A. And then your last bullet on the bottom, town council CTF presentation. I went looking in my CFAC folder. I couldn't find that. What is CTF?
Capital Trust Fund.
Okay. I didn't have that. That's a document I have to say.
I can send you the page. Actually, I think
I'd like to have the whole deck, and I could probably get that off the website, right, Mark?
Yes, I believe you can.
In the finance area or?
No, I think it's under you. If you go to the town council's area, of the
Okay.
Yeah.
webpage, you go to under presentations.
Okay, thank you.
So I didn't expect to get all the answers tonight, but I think this is the kind of data that we'll want to have or questions that we want to have answers to before we write the final report. So the earlier it can be identified. And I would recommend that we all think and kind of add to our own little list and combine them as we go through, just so we don't miss anything. And I've started them for finance. I did it for school. I only had one question, and according to our last meeting, we'll get an answer to that by the end of January when Sarah either send it to Mark, or it'll probably also be posted on their website. So I think the biggest issue was just trying to relate the facilities conditions assessment to what was recommended, because what's recommended is about 80% of that. And I just wanted to make sure we understood. DPW, we've sent them a whole bunch of questions earlier. I guess the follow-on to that is when things don't get recommended for funding that are approved, that are submitted, what happens to them over time? And this is kind of building on Jim's question and a little bit of what Dan Santos said during the task force, which is some of the places that are being approved or recommended have been recommended before and keep not happening. So, what's the impact of that? Do these assets just continue to deteriorate, or are they divested at some point in time, or what happens? I think is just a question I have. And again, we have DPW on the 22nd, so it behooves us to make sure we've got our ducks in order so that we get questions answered that we have while we have the right people there.
I think are some of these, to your question there though, isn't the immediacy by the department expressed in their ratings of the initial product? In other words, the 1 through 4 ratings that they have. So if somebody had it may appear year after year, be a 1, but not be, of a strategic importance, so that in fact, to your point, the asset could deteriorate over time. Right? If something is considered by a departmental head extremely important but not be funded due to strategic priorities, then in fact the asset could potentially be deteriorating, and possibly it might be looked at as an asset you want to sell or get rid of in some way, shape, or form. Public, privatize or something of that nature.
That was the kind of what I heard at the CIP task force between the lines, and I just think we ought to have a point of view on that.
I think that's a great idea. I mean, in corporate world, assets are bought and sold all the time, and it happens less frequently in the public sector. But given the fiscal and budget pressures that our town is going to face in the coming years, asset divestitures or sales should be something that we should reference and talk about and bring up as a topic for the town council to consider.
Yeah, I think that's a good hypothesis. I think that it's probably in some cases a third rail, so we may not want to go too far there, but I think at this stage we're early and we can have a wide view of things and at least get answers to help us understand these better. CWMP, I wanted to bring this up. I went through last year's report, and here is there were a whole bunch of things that I took as questions that I wondered if we ever got answers to them or felt we needed answers this year. And Hector, that was something you were involved in, so I'd look to you to, I don't need answers right now, but I'd like you to consider, do we have those, because we do have the CWMP thing coming up next week.
So it's certainly been top of mind for me to have the appropriate person at DPW address those questions. Mark, I'm inferring from the emails that the attendees at the 22nd meeting will be Steen and Santos. Do you happen to know if Griffin Bowden is also planning to attend? Because Griffin would be best placed, I believe, to answer some of these questions, or at least provide some of the detail that we might be looking for.
I can check with Director Santos to see who he plans on having attend on behalf of DPW.
Yeah, I would not only ask, but just tell him that we think that Griffin would be able to add a lot of value.
I know you submitted a list of questions for DPW previously, as indicated in the bottom of the slide here, but these are additional questions. And are these going to be delivered to DPW in advance of next Monday's meeting so that they have an opportunity to digest them and provide appropriate responses?
My suggestion would be yes. Neil?
Yeah, I'm totally open to that. I just wanted to, if these were questions last year, I would like to put them to bed or take them off the list. That's all.
Well, as you know, I've been very involved in the topic of offshore wind infrastructure being installed in our town, and one of the notions or mantras even that the developer and in addition the town has put up there is that there are lots of cost savings by coordinating sewer installation with power cable installation. but there are contrary points of view, so.
Right,
these
I
are-
think,
These are
I know you
important
have these.
questions.
So in the last year, you have not gotten an answer to any of
No.
these things, and especially A3.
No. I haven't, and I think Mark, you and I have talked about my desire to put some of these questions to DPW and Bowden in particular. Griffin and I have talked, not recently, but we've talked around some of these topics, but I think it would be good to get more formal answers. And I think, Neil, your initiative to bring these back up under the aegis of the CIP subcommittee is perfect. This is a good forum in which to address these questions. So yes, Mark, I think we should, the original list of DPW and CWMP queries, maybe we should update that list and send it to them, or just send them around to questions that include these questions.
If you want, Neil, I can just forward this particular slide to DPW.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
that'd be good. Definitely, I believe in giving people a heads up and not ambushing them in a meeting.
Yeah.
kind of stuff.
Well, yeah, it's not that. It's just that, they may need time to
Yeah.
to their appropriate staff person to review and to prepare an answer. So it just to spring it upon them on Monday night, they may not have an answer.
No,
For sure.
No. We don't want to do.
The other thing that I think is, and I'm glad to hear that Rob Steen is going to be there, is I came away for B. I had a lot of questions about that. That is half the increase in the CWMP costs in the next 4 years, or in cost increase.
I'm sorry, what is?
This is the reverse osmosis
Oh, right.
ultraviolet post-processing plant, which I know not a lot about, except that California is doing it because they're running out of water. I'm not sure if this will make it to the recommended or not, but it's such a big number. I think what we need to understand is this proposed? We'd have to have it, or is it a contingency, or is it just meant to make people aware that this is an option? So that's the question, because it's a big number.
And this is the first we've heard of it, right?
This is the first plan that I've ever seen that in.
Okay. Interesting. We should definitely drill down on this one.
Okay. So if that's all I had, there's probably more. And part of what I wanted to do was just make sure that we start to think about what are the questions we need to get answered to write our report, or to make, to kick these things off the table. As I felt last year's report with like questions A1, 2, and 3, we shouldn't have those same questions in the report this year. We either ought to have the answer or hopefully figure out a way to deal with them differently.
I just have an idea that I think I'll just insert here and see where it goes. So I was thinking about the increase. We've been talking a lot about increase in costs of the sewer and the debt service required to support that. And I was wondering, I guess, Mark, I'll ask for your guidance as well, is if we were to go into the road, so the roads have been funded between $3, I guess, and now $4 million. If you were to move $2 million of that dollars to support the debt service of the CWMP, my basic question is, could that be done? I mean, in other words, if you're going to borrow in the short term for sewer projects and we're not close to other means of overrides, etc., rather than dance around it, could we look at other pockets of funding that go to DPW that we could ask them to allocate towards debt service that may cover projects related to our most strategic one, which is the sewer project? So I guess I'll open it up with that. I don't know if it's not a good thought. I'm happy to shelve it, but I just was thinking of other ways, interim ways to help fund CWMP projects with other funding.
That was a great point, Jim. Those are all value, judgments that we have to make, and we could certainly, redirect $2 million a year from cash-funded public road improvements to pay for debt service and CWMP projects. But we would need to understand over time what would the impact be on our public road infrastructure of
Right.
making such a
Correct.
move.
Correct.
And so that evaluative process would have to be, performed by DPW to try to determine, well, what would be the impact over a period of time of making such a change.
Right. No,
I'm glad you brought it up though, because, it is something that we've looked at as part of our strategy for redirecting some more resources to debt service and away from cash, because under the Fair Share Amendment, which is the new tax on millionaires in Massachusetts, some of that money is being dedicated to public transportation projects.
okay.
And the state has recently awarded an additional sum of money to municipalities in the form of additional Chapter 90 allotments, under additional funding under the Chapter 90 formula or program for under that Fair Share Amendment. So Barnstable is actually going to get they're going to see their Chapter 90 allotment go from 2 million to over 3 million, just over 3 million. And so with another $1 million added to that program, perhaps what we're looking at is cutting that 3.8 million from public road funding within the Capital Trust Fund and pushing it to a debt service category. But then we have to choose, okay, what
Right.
debt service? Are we going to attack our public facilities, our heavily used public facilities like our public schools with a greater emphasis on doing more there? Or are we going to go after the CWMP? A lot of different value judgments that have to be made.
Yeah, I mean, I just as we keep exploring the increases, there's only a couple of different avenues that you can go, and one offset could be, decreases in cash expenditures and applications to other areas. So,
Well, Jim, I think your question is spot on. And there are going to be increasing, especially if Neil is correct in his debt forecast, there are going to be increasing pressures on the town to make tough choices. So I think it's part of our purview not only to evaluate those choices, but also I think we should consider other revenue raising sources. So for example, we have the rooms tax and the meals tax that CWMP, for example, gets a certain percentage of, or all of. I can't remember exactly what it is, but is that a place, and Mark, doubtless you've given some thought to this, or are those places where we should be looking as a subcommittee to recommend that increases in those taxes or in the share of taxes that go to CWMP are put through? So I absolutely think that, this CIP, one of our duties is to opine on matters like that.
Yeah, so for the committee's benefit, just so you know, currently 100% of meals tax and 100% of rooms tax on short-term rentals are dedicated to funding the CWMP program. And 1/3 of the rooms tax on traditional lodging is dedicated to the CWMP program.
Yeah,
And the balance of that one, the 2/3 balance of that last one goes to general revenues, right?
Yeah, that's in the general fund, and that was always part of the general fund revenue stream prior to them increasing the local rooms tax from 4% to 6%. When they did that, when they authorized that, same time they authorized the local meals tax, the town council voted to increase that local rooms tax from 4 to 6%, dedicating that increase to the CWMP, but not touching the existing 4%, which was funding general fund programs.
Right. Well, I think that the percentage, I think we as a subcommittee ought to explore whether a higher proportion of that last category goes to CWMP. And then as far as the first two taxes, do we have flexibility under state law to increase those percentages?
No, we do not. They're at the maximum amount allowed.
Well, I guess my point is, I think we as a subcommittee need to talk about revenue raising opportunities wherever they may be found, if only to forestall the eventual tax debt override that we're going to face as a community. Because Mark, as you've said, if the debt override is going to be a hard fought battle to get the vote at 51% of Barnstable voters to approve it. And if they don't approve it, and if we need the funds to support CWMP, then at that point, the town would have to cut somewhere else.
Right,
Yep.
and that's, yeah, I mean, if you don't get the funding through debt exclusion override to pay for the CWMP projects, you're looking at either postponing or delaying the implementation of the CWMP, or cutting services somewhere, maybe across the board, and redirecting those dollars to funding the CWMP.
Right.
I should mention, in the last couple of days, I've kind of uncovered, at least it was new to me, 3 of the sewer systems in CWMP have been pushed out past 2028. That we're about 20 to 25% of the sewer connections. We might want to ask about that next week too, and I didn't put it here. I can get you an updated slide that you can send to DPW by tomorrow morning, Mark. But that's a question I had. It seemed like we have fewer sewer connections in phase 1, and I'm not quite sure because it stops this planning phase stops just before the end of phase 1. If they're just slipped a year or if they're slipping out further, but it has an impact on things. That's actually what kept the price increase that they're for CWMP from not going up another $40 to $50 million. So to try to go for the 6 o'clock time frame, we have 10 minutes left. So if I could move us along, I don't want to cut off discussion, but what do you think?
I'm happy to move.
Yeah, I'm happy to move. And Neil, I support any other questions. I went through this afternoon, I went through all the emails you've sent to us since mid-December. And I noted that question in particular, the pushing back of the sewer connections, which of course has budget implications because you get fewer $10,000 assessment fees in those early years. So I definitely think we should ask about that. Mark, I just have one point of information. What is the last year of phase 1? Is it fiscal year 2030 or 2031?
I think we implemented this in 2021, so
Fiscal 2030 then.
yeah, so
Yeah, but it actually started in 2022, according to the Barnstable Water Resources website. I can get that information. That was one of the things I wasn't clear on either.
Yeah.
The website's very clear. We just don't know when those are rescheduled because they're past the 5-year time frame.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Sorry to interrupt.
And
Go
we'll,
ahead.
and we'll continue to build on this, is I think the idea.
Yeah.
I just don't want to end up at March 4th when we've got to end to start really reviewing what's actually being recommended and then
Right.
end up with these questions. We won't have time.
Right.
Okay, so we put this off from last time because we ran out of time. I wanted to make sure we had everything assigned between the three of us, and then as we need help, we'll know what to ask for, so we can also respond to Lillian's question. Do we need more staffing, and if so, for what? And who would we like if we could? So I'll take the cover page because it was good information. I think I would be willing to draft the executive summary, but I think it's kind of a joint thing. Jim volunteered for general fund, for enterprise fund. I can do the 5-year plan because I've done the analysis on how those compare, because those are all based on submission. Hector, you said you were going to do the debt section because you're the
Right.
debt expert among us.
Right. And I'm happy to do CWMP too. I think I've said that earlier.
Okay, that's what Jim said, and I missed
Yeah.
that.
Yep.
Okay.
So put my name in there.
And what I'll plan to do, as you can see, I have a great interest in the financials on that. I'll continue to feed you my
Okay.
analysis, and you can decide whether you want to use it or not.
Excellent.
But
Thank you.
because I think that's going to be, the town has some really strategic decisions there, but the costs are just so large. I'm going to have to go. Darn it, because the
Okay.
good news is the repair guy is here, but I'll leave this on. And we'll go.
Can Mark continue with that slide presentation?
Do you have it, Mark? Can you?
I have the slide deck.
I apologize, but you guys don't want me to freeze, do you?
It's quite all right. All we really need to tackle is the calendar, and I think your calendar, Neil, on page 11, is the best we're going to do right now. So we may need to tweak that. If I have any other thoughts, either Jim or I will call you or get in touch somehow. All right, we lost Neil.
Okay, let's see if I can stop his screen from sharing. There we go. Okay, let me get that slide deck back up. Okay, can you see this okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, so this is the last page of his slide deck, and this is the calendar that you wanted to talk about, Hector.
Yeah, and I don't know what you think, Jim, but I think this suffices for now.
Yeah,
I don't
most
see any material changes to make. I guess, Jim, I would just if we go back to the prior, Mark, if you go back to page 10, slide 10, Jim, the only thing that I'm wondering is if we had, and maybe it's in the implications of the debt section, but I'm thinking we ought to preview for the town council based on our analysis and and based on the projections, but we ought to preview for the town council any tough choices that they're going to have to be making in the coming years. And maybe that's in the implications of debt section, but that it just seems to me that we can provide a service to Craig and his colleagues on the council if we're pretty direct about what we expect to happen in future years.
Yeah, Hector, I think that'd be very valuable for everyone to see that. I mean, there's going to be some huge choices coming up. you know, the pie is only so big and it's not getting bigger.
Right. And Mark, we haven't talked about a debt exclusion override lately, but is it still your current thinking that this event occurs in advance of fiscal year 2027?
And so we're going through that process now of evaluating cash flow and funding sources for the CWMP, along with DPW's latest round of CWMP's project submissions. So we haven't made the determination yet as to how far we can go as far as funding with existing resources, but we can, other than I can say that the projects that on their FY25 list, we have the available resources to implement. It's unclear yet whether or not we can implement all the projects on the 2026 lists. We're working on a plan to figure out a way where we can do that, but certainly once we get to the 2027 list, our analysis right now is showing that we can't do those projects without some new funding sources becoming available.
And of course, this process, the process of new funding is a dynamic one. We might be more successful with state revolving loan fund applications, or there might be some new infrastructure money. I mean, who knows? But
I mean, remember when the guy gave the presentation, whoever the citizen was, talked about the original plan was 60 years. I mean, you may have to rethink 30 years. So who knows? I mean,
yeah, I mean, our original plan was 60 years, as you pointed out, Jim, and then we cut that down to 30 because of pressure that we were receiving from groups like the Conservation Law Foundation and the lawsuits that were filed against us. And so that was a way to try to, bring closure to, a couple of lawsuits that we were facing. But certainly by shrinking the plan in half, it creates a significant financial impact on the town and reducing the number of years to implement the plan.
so I guess back to my original point on slide 10 is we might want to, and consistent with what Craig just said, we might want to be more direct in terms of naming those sections, and or possibly, Jim, adding a new section, just calling out the tough choices that town's council will have to focus on in the future. Craig, I think you're well aware. I mean, you've been through these, in your 40 years with the town as an employee, you were witness to the annual budget cycle. So I think you have an especially knowledgeable perspective on the budget pressures facing the town. But some of the other counselors, especially some of the new ones, I think we have to be very direct with them and get them thinking.
Absolutely. Quite frankly, there are some people that spent very little time following the town, and as new counselors, they've got a very, very steep learning curve on everything.
Right. Craig, I have a question for you. So was it the last town council meeting where Mark went through his presentation on town finances? Did you find that was helpful with folks like Kristen or Charlie Bloom? Did that help them get up the curve a little bit more?
I think so. Every little bit helps, and even the first time you go through it, they're not going to get the implications of it all. Especially when you start talking about future funding and bonding, and it's one thing to wrap your head around the current operating budget, but when you start talking about 5-year plans or 10-year plans, or this is going to happen in 26, or this is going to happen in 27 or 27, you're looking for a new finance plan for it, that sort of thing. That takes a lot to try to get that all organized in your head.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's helpful to know. I thought the slide deck itself was very good, and I listened to Mark on the replay, but I
Yep.
was curious
Yep.
to get your take on that. So,
No,
Craig,
Mark does an excellent job, I think,
Yeah.
of bringing the conversation, I don't want to say down, but,
right,
adjusting it to the level of his audience,
yeah,
and what
yeah.
they need to know, because there's
Yeah.
so much information.
Yeah. So while you're on the podium there, Craig, did you have any comments about what Neil, Jim, and I and Mark just went through? Anything you want to add to the discussion?
No, I think one question I think Neil had at one point is, what happens to these assets? And having
Yeah.
been in situations where we've put in requests year after year, they do deteriorate, and it becomes a point where at some point you say, listen, what are we going to do with this? And oftentimes that's where you get financing is
Right.
I mean, there's just so many competing priorities.
Yeah.
Everyone has a project that they feel, and rightly so, should be funded, but there's
Right.
just so many dollars to go around.
Right. Are you, or Mark, is either of you aware of asset sales the town has engaged in the past, other than the occasional sale of a piece of property somewhere?
Not off the top of my head. I mean, there've been some land swaps, as you said, and
Right.
some sales, such as the one that's
Right.
on the agenda for Thursday night.
Hmm.
I can't think of any real assets that have been sold
Yeah.
off the top of my head.
Yeah.
The only major one in my time here, Hector, has been the former grade 5 school,
Sure.
which is now
Sure.
Pope John Paul
Yeah.
School. We sold that building to the diocese for, I think, $3.5 million back in the early 2000s.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's good. I think we've had an excellent meeting. Jim, did you have any parting comments?
I just have one thought on slide 9, and I promise I won't take any more than a minute. I just wonder if we could so looking at question 2, I was thinking about if I was sitting in Dan's shoes or Garrett's shoes. I mean, so we're saying the opportunity cost savings. So the savings from efficiency are connected to the electrical conduits. What another question might be is, what would the cost be with, in other words, given the uncertainties with Avant-Grid, let's just make the assumption we have no cost savings. What would that number look like? Right, so if you had no cost savings associated with that, what would that number be? And then the delta between what they're currently proposing and what would be proposed without conduit savings would be the efficiencies.
Yeah. So I think that's an excellent question, but my premise in asking question 2 is, my query is, are they all cost savings that we're talking about, and or are there cost increases because of having to coordinate sewer installation with the cable conduits? And as an example, I think Craig, maybe you know this, on Strawberry Hill Road, they actually hadn't planned for this, but they needed to move some of the water mains,
Right.
To make them put them further away from the concrete cable conduits because of the heat associated with it, and that added cost. So
Then the question is, who paid those costs?
right. Well, that's a follow-on question, but Jim, I'm questioning this comment that there are synergies and efficiencies.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. So
Understood.
so yes, I'd like to explore this topic, because it's a mantra that Avangrid repeats all the time, that they're saving the town millions of dollars. And I asked Griffin this question in a one-on-one phone call 6 months ago, and he said the only cost savings are when Avangrid repaves the road curb to curb after everything goes in.
Right.
So I'm just questioning the premise about cost savings and efficiencies. So I'd
Yeah,
like to
because I
hear
don't think
DB.
that the crews don't work in tandem. One comes in after the other. So
That's
whether
right.
it's coming in and doing the project by yourself or following along, there might be some minor costs as far as the road opening or whatever, but it would seem that there wouldn't be a lot of savings with the exception of the final paving, which is considerable. I mean, there is,
Yeah,
it is a
the-
considerable expense.
yeah. Griffin ballparks that cost, Craig, as you know, to be about $1 million a mile.
Right.
So,
Right.
all right. Anything else we should cover? Mark, have we gotten everything, talked about everything on the agenda here? Oh, who and are more staff needed? I don't think we can answer that yet, quite yet. Jim, do you think we can answer that?
Not at this time, no.
Okay. And the calendar, I think we decided to leave as is. So I think that pretty much wraps it up for tonight, folks.
Very good.
Okay,
Okay.
Thank you.
So thank you, Jim. Let's take a roll to conclude the meeting. Jim?
yes.
Okay, and I'll say yes too. So thanks